Hi, welcome to part one of our Core Foundations series that is designed to help you recheck in with your deep core and restore functionality in your deep core. This workout is amazing for anyone who feels like they might not be really working their deep core in a way that supports their spine. So if you're suffering from back pain, if you need to improve your posture, if you are someone who maybe just had a baby and you feel like your core has been ripped apart, because it has, this is the workout for you. It is a great place to get started no matter where you are. Even if you're an advanced athlete, sometimes it's really good to just check in and make sure you're breathing properly and that your deep core is functioning properly. We're going to start today really basic and really simple. Check into all the different parts of our body, check into our breath, find all the different muscles of the deep core and make sure we have just a sense of them. And then we'll move on to more complex movement in parts 2 through 4 of this series. So let's get started today just by talking about what neutral pelvis and what neutral spine really mean, because in order to really get into these deep core muscles and use them functionally, we have to find a good neutral. So let's start by talking about neutral pelvis. Neutral pelvis means that our pelvis is in its natural alignment with the hip bones here, or your ASIS bones, in line on the same plane with your pubic bone. So many of us end up either tucking with the pubic bone forward of the hip bones or overarching this way with the hip bones falling forward and the pubic bone reaching back. And we want to find the point right in the middle where the ASIS and the pubic bone are on the same plane. When we're like this, our sacrum and our pubic bone are in line, and our tailbone and our pubis are just reaching straight down towards the ground. So we'll talk about that in a lot of different positions. But you want to make sure that we really find that neutral pelvis before we do any of the exercises so that you can really make sure the deep core has its best chance of functioning. When we are outside of neutral, our muscles aren't in the right position to do their best firing and their best work. We're going to go ahead and lay down for a second to then also talk about neutral spine. So lay down on your mat. Find a comfortable position with your legs bent and your feet flat on the mat. And now go ahead and find your neutral pelvis. So your hip bones and your pubic bone are on the same plane. And you can go ahead and check it out and look. You want to be careful that we're not tipped this way with the pubic bone up to the sky, or you're not overarching and dropping your pubic bone down towards the mat. So really, pubic bone should be pointing straight forward through your thighs. Hip bones should be nice and level. If you have scoliosis, you might not have completely level hips, but see if you can get as close to level as possible. Now, depending on what's going on with your body and what your body's used to having, this might feel super foreign to you, or maybe even a little bit uncomfortable. If this feels uncomfortable, I'm just going to encourage you to try to maintain the position, but just relax and release any tension. And as your body gets more used to this, it should start to feel like less and less work. Now, we have our neutral pelvis, we maintain our neutral pelvis, and with that neutral pelvis, we should be able to find the natural curves of the spine. So our lumbar spine, our low back, has a natural lordosis, which means this concave curve. So if you have a neutral pelvis, you should also have a little bit of space between your low back and the mat. And then our thoracic spine, where our rib cage is a convex curve, which means it actually rounds back a little bit in opposition of that lumbar lordosis. So in order to feel that and have that, we should feel the back of the rib cage against the mat. A lot of us get tight in that back space around the kidneys and around the lower ribs and have this disconnection of the ribs to the mat. So you want to try to allow your ribs to rest heavy and find some lengthening up the back instead of shortening and compressing back there. So we keep our lumbar lordosis, our lumbar curve, and then we try to feel those ribs heavy into the mat. From there, the cervical spine at your neck has the same lordotic or concave curve as your lumbar spine. So the neck should not be pressing down into the mat. You should have a little bit of space there, with the back of the head into the mat and the nose pointing straight up. I want you to be cautious of some forward head and hyperextension of the neck. So if you feel like you're almost looking backwards a little bit, or you even feel like you have trouble getting your head neutral without popping your ribs off, you may want to put a little bit of a cushion underneath your head to help you maintain neutral with the nose pointing straight up to the sky, ears right over the centers of the shoulders. So that's our neutral pelvis and our neutral spine. Take a second there just to feel it. Check in, make sure you haven't moved out of it, because sometimes we do. I'm prone to a posterior tilt, and I need to really check in and reach my pubic bone through the knees and lengthen, making sure the hip bones and the pubic bone are on the same plane. I encourage you to use your hands as we're doing this and check it out and make sure you're there and look at it so you can visualize it and then also feel it so you can get that reinforcement in the brain. Ribs heavy, nice and relaxed. And go ahead and start to just breathe here and just notice what your breath does. Notice where it goes. I don't want you to fix it or do anything, just breathe. And release. One more, just noticing where your breath goes. Is it in your shoulders, your chest, your belly, your ribs? So now we've found our neutral pelvis and our neutral spine, and hopefully that will help us get the most out of all the exercises and breath work we're going to do. So now we're going to start to tap into all the different deep core muscles. In this series, we're going to focus on the diaphragm, which is your primary respiration muscle, your transverse abdominis, which is your deepest abdominal muscle, and your pelvic floor. We also consider the multifidi part of the deep core, which are the deep muscles of your spine, but we're going to talk a lot more about the diaphragm, the transverse abdominis, and the pelvic floor today. So we're going to start with accessing the diaphragm to make sure we're breathing well. It's so important. Your breathing muscles are your deep core muscles. You can't have good deep core functionality unless you are breathing properly. So it's super important, and I encourage you to focus on your breath at least once a day. We'll talk about an exercise you can do on your own at the end. So I am going to encourage you to sit in this kneeling position. It's a really great place to start. I like to use a block under my pelvis to support the position and be a little bit more comfortable in your knees. If this does not feel good for your knees, your hips, your ankles, go ahead and sit on a chair or a stool. But I do want you to go ahead and be upright for this instead of lying on your mat. So find a comfortable position. You could also sit on a bolster, a yoga bolster if you have something like that, or a stack of blankets. So go ahead and find a comfortable position. And then we'll find our neutral pelvis and our neutral spine. So hip bones and pubic bone on the same plane. Find that. And then your ribs should stack right over the pelvis. Elongate through the back of the spine, through the back of the ribs, and try to press your head back gently so that your ears are over your shoulders without popping the ribs out of alignment. So we should have the rib cage stacked right over the pelvis. They should mirror each other completely. So now we're in that neutral spine position. And we're going to start to breathe into our diaphragm. So our diaphragm is a dome-shaped muscle at the base of the ribs. And when you aren't inhaling, when it's relaxed, it's domed up into the rib cage. And when you inhale, it domes down into the abdomen. It is connected all the way around from front to back, and it can expand forward, sideways, backwards, and down. So we're going to think about all of those different points. I want you to go ahead and put your hands on your belly to start. Eyes forward, make sure you're neutral. Sometimes I look down, but try to make sure you're neutral. And we're going to try to just, first of all, relax the belly. So you want to make sure you're not holding your superficial abdominal muscles. We're allowing them to relax. If that means your belly gets into a position or a look that you don't love, that's okay. We're not watching you. We're not judging you. It's fine. It is so important for the functionality of your core to let it release, not just tight all the time, right? So release any tension you might be holding in your abs or your obliques. We don't need to see your six-pack right now. Let it relax. And then when you breathe, try to imagine filling up your belly with your breath. And then exhale and just release it out. Now I don't need that to mean that you push your belly out. I just want you to imagine allowing the belly to relax and expand with the movement of the diaphragm down into the abdomen. Exhale it out. Take that again. Inhale. And exhale. And inhale, expand, letting the belly expand. And exhale. One more breath just like that, just allowing the belly to move fluidly with the movement of the diaphragm. The diaphragm domes down into the abdomen. The belly expands in response, and then you exhale it back up. Now we're going to keep focusing on the diaphragm, but we're going to put our focus more in the expansion at the ribs. So I want you to go ahead and put your hands on the sides and the backs of your ribs in a comfortable position. Check in, make sure you haven't lost your neutral. So neutral pelvis, ribs stacked right over the hips. And this time as you inhale, I want you to really focus on expanding your rib cage into your hands. So inhale and fill up those hands. And then exhale and release it. Inhale again. And exhale, release. Most people don't have trouble expanding through the front and kind of letting these open. It's this back space that gets tricky. So really try to focus on the sides and backs of the ribs. Inhale into that space. And exhale to release. Take it 2 more times. Inhale. And exhale. Good, last one, trying to deepen your breath. And exhale. Good. Now we also can expand up a little bit, right, into the sternum, into this upper portion of the rib cage, and that's a good thing, we need that. So I want you to go ahead and put your hand on your sternum and then your other hand on the back of your rib cage. Find your neutral. And then we go ahead and we breathe into this space, trying to send it on this diagonal into the chest and the back ribs. So breathe in. Feel the expansion and then exhale and release. Taking that again, breathe it in. And exhale and release. Good, one more like that. And exhale and release. Now I want you to just drop your hands down to your thighs. And we'll take 3 more breaths, focusing on the image of the doming down and the doming up of the diaphragm. And you can think about a jellyfish. As you inhale, the jellyfish domes down. As you inhale, the diaphragm domes down and expands the ribs and the lungs. And then as you exhale, it domes up into the ribs. So just rest your hands down. And take that inhale, imagine the doming down, and it expands out and down. And then on your exhale, it domes in and up. Inhale, expand down and out. Exhale, draw in and up. One more. Inhale, expand down and out. And exhale, in and up. Beautiful. We're going to continue with our breath, but now we're going to find some awareness in the pelvic floor. So let's actually change positions. If you need to relax your knees at all, go ahead and maybe stand up for a second. We're going to go into a deep child's pose position to try to stretch the pelvic floor. We can chat for a second first, actually. So the pelvic floor actually mirrors the diaphragm perfectly. It's this hammock of muscles at the base of your pelvis between your pubis, your sacrum, your tailbone, and your sits bones. So it's at the base of your pelvis. It goes all the way around, and it supports your organs and supports your pelvis and your spine. So sometimes people think that it's always weak, but it can also be tight. So we're going to go ahead and find some awareness in it, make sure it's nice and stretched and supple, and then work on strengthening it as well. So go ahead and come to a nice, comfortable child's pose position. Support your knees with some towels if it's uncomfortable for you. And I want you to have wide knees, so knees a little bit wider than the hips. And then you're just going to reach out long with your arms and sit back onto your heels. So maybe you feel some length through your back, and that's good. Feel free to prop yourself up in any way you need to make this a comfortable position for you. Feel free to prop this up in any way that makes the position comfortable for you, and just rest. So maybe you have a blanket or a pillow underneath your body. If you can't go all the way down, that's totally fine. Now we're going to think about our sits bones, these bony things at the bottom of your pelvis, being nice and wide. And remember, the pelvic floor spans all 4 points, so pubic bone to tailbone to sits bones. It's all across that whole area. You can think about it kind of as a diamond. And we're going to try to breathe down into that diamond here and feel it expand and widen on our inhales. And then exhale and release. And don't stress too much if you feel like it is impossible for you to find awareness there. It takes some time. Inhale to breathe in. Feel the space in that diagonal widen between those 4 points. And exhale. And it's not going to feel like a stretch the way a hamstring stretch feels. We're just trying to kind of change the texture of it and let it become nice and supple and not holding tight. And exhale. One more breath like that. And exhale and release. Good. Now we'll come back to our kneeling or sitting position. And I do encourage you to find a position where you can have something against the pelvis, because now we're going to use that feedback against the pelvic floor to help you access it. So if you can sit on a block like this, that's great, do so. If not, and you're sitting on a chair, maybe roll up a towel or something to have underneath your pelvis comfortably. So we're going to find our neutral again, hip bones and pubic bone on the same plane, ribs directly over the hips. And we're going to put our mind's eye in that space between pubic bone and tailbone and 2 sits bones. And then try to imagine feeling your pelvic floor down into whatever prop is underneath your pelvis. You could be sitting on a roller or a ball or a block like this. And then we're going to breathe and we're going to let the pelvic floor mirror the diaphragm and dome down into our block on our inhale. So go ahead and take that inhale. Get a sense of widening and doming down. And then on your exhale, you can actually feel it gather and lift slightly. And then again, imagine the same thing you did with your diaphragm. Inhale to feel that expand. And then exhale and start to draw it in and up. So we're starting to engage it and release it. Both are very important. Inhale to dome down and widen. And exhale to gather and lift. Now, you have 2 different regions of the pelvic floor, anterior in the front and posterior in the back. And sometimes it's the posterior pelvic floor gets tight and overactive, and the front of the pelvic floor is less functional. Actually, both of those things are dysfunctional, right? Weak and not tightening is dysfunctional, but also too tight and overworking is dysfunctional too. So we want to get the engagement a little bit more even and make sure we're not doing all the work with our posterior pelvic floor. So we're going to talk about that a little bit. I want you to go ahead and engage your pelvic floor by narrowing the sits bones, kind of squeezing your anus, and then also thinking about like holding a stream of pee in, right? So you're engaging at the front of the pelvis and at the back of the pelvis. And then I want you to try to release the engagement in the back, but maintain the engagement in the front. And that can be hard. And then release. So if we think about, so our pubic bone, right, is the bone here, and our sacrum is the bone in the back. We can talk about it in a bony way. You're going to go ahead and think about drawing the pubic bone towards the sacrum, but leaving the sacrum there. Yeah, so let's take an inhale again and widen. And then exhale and draw the pubic bone towards the sacrum and lift a little bit. So we want to have this feeling of gathering and lifting of the pelvic floor. So it's a feeling of drawing in and up through the front of the body without squeezing and tucking the sits bones together, right? So there's a little bit of narrowing between the sits bones, but we want to be careful that it doesn't make us tuck, right? So we're engaging without doing any movement of the pelvis here. Let's find our neutral again, make sure we're there. And then try some engagement again. So take an inhale, imagine the pelvic floor widening and releasing. And then on your exhale, think about gathering and lifting from the front of the pelvis, right underneath the pubic bone, in and up into your belly. And then inhale and release that engagement fully and feel that nice width and release at the bottom. Exhale, same thing, gather and lift. And then release. Again, we gather and lift from the front of the pelvis, below the pelvis, up and in, and release. 2 more like that, exhale. And inhale to release and widen fully. Make sure you release all the way. Exhale. And once we start to get access to these muscles and encourage them to work, it will start to happen functionally and responsively without us even noticing. So this work doesn't mean that out in your daily life you're going to have to consciously engage your pelvic floor before you do any challenging movement. That's not the case. What we're doing here is getting these muscles to fire when they're supposed to, getting them to respond to your breath, which you're always doing just normally in your day-to-day life anyway, so that they're there and they're functioning properly without conscious engagement. So now we'll switch gears a little bit to the transverse abdominis, which is our deepest abdominal muscle. It's deep to the other muscles and it wraps around you like a corset. So it's really good for spinal stability, stabilizing the abdomen, it compresses your abdomen a bit, and it also works in response to breath. So on the inhale, it should expand a bit in all directions, and on the exhale, it should narrow and decrease the diameter of the abdomen and press in a little bit. And if we get these functioning properly, they should all work together and respond together. So let's take another inhale, allowing the belly to release, allowing the pelvic floor to widen. And then on the exhale, I want you to imagine narrowing the waist as though there's a corset squeezing around you and drawing in and up from the low belly. So it's a narrowing of the diameter of the waist and a lifting up and in of the skin, of the flesh of the belly, without changing your pelvis or changing your ribs. Let's inhale and release it. Exhale again. Feel a narrowing of the waist and a drawing in and up of the low belly. The belly button will actually draw up slightly. And then inhale and release it. And if you put your hands on the inside of your hip bones, you should actually feel a little bit of engagement there. So let's inhale again, feeling length through the spine. And then exhale and narrow the waist and draw the belly in and up. Taking that again, inhale. And exhale, narrow the waist, draw in and up. Keep lengthening through the spine. Feel like someone's lifting you from the tops of your ears. So you're always lifting tall, even as we're engaging. There should never feel like a crunching down. So if you're feeling your pelvis tip or you're feeling your ribs crunch down, you're doing too much with your more superficial abdominals. So maintain your length. We should be able to engage these muscles without shortening anything. And it may feel a little bit deeper than you're used to, right? It shouldn't feel like a huge kind of burning, tightening, crunching, bracing. It should feel like a deep lift up through the center of the body. Let's take two more. Inhale. Exhale, narrow and draw in and up. And again, inhale. And exhale, draw in and up. Now that breathing that we found in the sides of the rib cage and in the sternum and in the ribs is actually what we need to use when we're doing more complicated movements and maybe you're doing a workout where you need your abs to stay engaged throughout. So let's practice that a little bit. We're going to take our inhale and exhale, find that abdominal engagement. So you find that narrowing and lifting up, and then I want you to hold it and try to breathe just into those ribs. Expand out to the sides and to the back, keeping that abdominal engagement, and then exhale and see if you could connect even more into those abs. Take it again, inhale into the sides and backs of the ribs, focusing on the expansion out to the side. And maybe up into your sternum a little. And then exhale and narrow the waist further and draw the belly in and up. One more like that. And then exhale, narrow. And draw in and up. Good. Let's relax for a second. And then we're going to switch gears and go to a hands and knees position just to reinforce that a little bit more in a slightly harder position. So when we come to hands and knees, you want to make sure your hands are directly under your shoulders and your knees are directly underneath your hips. Now, what most of us tend to do here, based on the fact that we sit a lot, is be a little bit rounded in our spine or have our tailbone shooting down. So I want you to really feel your sits bones widen and reach back, your tailbone reach back, and imagine shining a light out of your pelvic outlet, the bottom of your pelvis, and shining that light straight back and not down towards the ground. So shine that light. And that should give us a nice neutral pelvis here. And then with our neutral spine, we shouldn't let the ribs drop down like this. So press the ground away with your hands and feel a gentle lifting of the ribs so that they're in line with the fronts of the hips. Now, we are going to maintain that neutral spine this entire time. We are not going to be moving at all here with the spine, just with our breath and our engagement. So take your inhale and allow that belly to release. Really let it go. Let your belly drop to the ground with your inhale. And then on your exhale, draw it back up and in without changing the spine at all. So we're just hugging the belly up and into the back without rounding the spine, without changing the ribs, without tucking the pelvis, none of that. Inhale again to let the belly release. And then exhale and hug it in without changing the spine at all. Again, inhale. See if you can feel the pelvic floor a little bit too. Exhale, draw in. Feel a gather and lift of your pelvic floor. Again. Exhale, draw in and up. One more, make sure it doesn't tuck your tail at all. I can feel when I engage my pelvic floor that it wants to tuck my tail. But you want to be able to engage these muscles in neutral. Exhale, draw in and up. Belly pulls in, pelvic floor narrows and lifts. And then go ahead and sit back into your child's pose, widening the knees again, reaching your arms forward, dropping the forehead to the mat. And take 2 more breaths trying to expand into your back body here and the pelvic floor. So we're opening in those spaces that are kind of hard to find again. Inhale. And exhale. One more like that. And exhale. Now you'll come back up to hands and knees and gently bring yourself up into an upstretch position with your heels down. And then walk your hands in towards your feet. Feel free to bend your knees. There's no need to worry about having straight legs here. And then you're just going to start to slowly roll up. And I want you to start to feel a little bit of a connection in your belly. So feel a little bit of hollowing and drawing in and up, not bracing, just feel that hollowing sensation. And stack all the way up to standing. And then we're going to practice just a little bit more breathing in a standing position. So find a comfortable standing with your heels directly underneath your hips. Find your neutral pelvis here in standing and make sure your ribs are stacked right over your hips and your ears are back in line with the middles of the shoulders. So we're nice and stacked here. We're going to find that position, we're going to hold it, try to find ease in that position. And then you'll breathe in and find the same expansion of belly and pelvis. And then exhale and draw in and up with the pelvic floor and the low belly and narrow the waist. Inhale, release. And exhale, draw in and up. Narrowing the waist, drawing the low belly in and up. Feeling this fountain of energy up through the center of the body. And exhale, in and up. Now, we're going to keep going like that, but I want your focus to be now on making your exhale and your inhale as full and as deep as possible. So the more we can breathe all of our air out and really expel everything out of our lungs, the better our inhales are going to be as well, and it's going to start to function and deepen our breath just in our day-to-day life and our physical endeavors. So find your nice neutral standing position, take an inhale, feel the expansion, and then on your exhale, breathe all your air out, and just make your focus about literally breathing every little bit of air out. Breathe out more, breathe out more, breathe out more, breathe out more, breathe out more. And you'll feel that that naturally kind of engages all the stuff we've found already. Make sure you don't crunch down to do it. Stay lifted. And then take a big full inhale again. Expand. And then exhale. Breathe it all out, breathe it all out, breathe it all out. Getting a little bit more out than you think you can while maintaining a long spine. And then again, inhale. And exhale. Breathe it all out. Breathe it all out, breathe it all out. One more, inhale. And exhale, breathe it all out. And then just relax into standing. And take a couple big deep breaths without my cueing, without any direction, and see if it feels any different from those breaths you took when you were laying down. And maybe it will and maybe it won't, and that's okay. We'll continue to do this breath and deep engagement and awareness work as we work through more complicated exercises in the rest of this series that I invite you to join me in. Thank you so much for joining today. Great work. Let me give you a little bit of an assignment to do at home. So I encourage you to find that comfortable sitting position. It's really, or kneeling position. And if kneeling doesn't work for you, then sitting. And then you will go ahead and find your neutral pelvis and your neutral spine. I also encourage you to be willing to kind of strip down for this and get in touch with your body however best you can. Again, you're doing this at home in the privacy of your own home, so if you want to strip down to just leggings and a bra or something like that, that's going to be the best for you to really get a feel for what your body's doing. So when you can, every day, I want you to find this position. It's easy to do. You can do it while you're watching TV, although I encourage you to do it mindfully without any distractions. Find your neutral pelvis, find your neutral spine. Use a mirror if you need to, really check in. And then practice your breath and your engagement. So we inhale, we feel the expansion and the widening, and then we exhale and we feel the narrowing and the drawing in and up of both the pelvic floor and the waist. You're going to do that 20 times. You can do it a couple times a day, but make sure you get in at least 20 breaths where you breathe and you expand, trying to get the breath down and not up into the shoulders. So expanding down through the ribs, down through the belly, down through the pelvis, and then exhaling and lifting the pelvic floor in and up, narrowing the waist, drawing in and up, and then release. So practice that 20 times at least once a day, every day, and you can continue that until you do the next video, and then I encourage you to continue doing it as you progress to more intense workouts too.